Some years ago, a non-duality website called non-dualitymagazine.org invited contributors to submit articles in answer to a long series of questions that they had posed about non-duality, and particularly about how an enlightened person, an enlightened man or an enlightened woman would behave. And this invitation seems to me also to be an invitation for us to make massive projections and to encourage massive projections about the very idea of there being such things as enlightened people. So I decided that I would write my reply from that angle, and to give non-dualitymagazine.org its due, it did eventually publish my article. The invitation consisted partly of numerous questions for the people who were submitting articles to address about enlightened beings and other matters. And for the purposes of my reply, I summarized these myriad of questions into a very few, which I'll start by reading now, and then I'll read the article that I wrote. So I summed up their questions in this way. What happens to the mind at death? Is there rebirth? Could an enlightened person fear death or spiders? Would an enlightened person wear lipstick or have liposuction? In other words, would they still have the kind of ego that would care about how they appeared, how they looked, and how they were perceived by other people? And finally, could an enlightened person feel anger or anxiety or make disclaimers about their offer? So in other words, could an enlightened person still feel uncomfortable feelings? And the last bit of that, I think, was a little swipe at the various websites that were beginning to appear at that time, some years ago, on non-duality, where part of the deal that was offered was absolutely, you know, a disclaimer. I am not a therapist. I am not a teacher. I am not offering any advice. I cannot be held legally responsible for anything that happens as a result of anybody reading anything that's on this website. So anyway, I'm now going to read out the article that I sent them, the brief article that I sent them in answer to this invitation. The assumption underlying these questions is that there may be such a thing as an enlightened person, or even worse, an enlightened person with a capital E and a capital P, who might manifest certain characteristics by which they could be recognized. These characteristics might include knowing what happens to the mind at death and whether there is such a thing as rebirth, not fearing death or spiders, not wearing lipstick or having liposuction, not losing their temper or getting anxious, and definitely not making legal disclaimers. We only have to grant some of these characteristics, and we have started to create the idea of a God-man or a God-woman. I would suggest that by and large, God-men and God-women are very bad news. They are likely to lead us a merry dance during which we may lose our relationships, our credit cards, and possibly our minds. Like other lovers, they often break our hearts. But a God-man or a God-woman is only an idea, and there is no such thing as an enlightened person or an enlightened person with a capital E and a capital P. This is why we can dismiss anyone who proclaims himself to be in any of these categories. Enlightenment is a weasel word, which I usually avoid, but as non-dualitymagazine.org has posed its questions using this term, I'll stick to it. Your magazine, your rules. Enlightenment consists precisely of the direct seeing that there is no person, so there cannot be any enlightened people. There is no self, so the quest for selflessness is futile. We are seeking to lose something which we do not have, because there is no one to have it. Although there are no rules, the direct seeing of oneness tends to leave a deep recognition of unknowing. Questions such as what happens at death? Is there rebirth and karma? And is it vain to wear lipstick? If not, what shade suits me best? Dissolve in this great unknowing. The mind, pretending for a moment that there is such a thing, simply loses interest in topics about which nothing but baseless speculation can take place. Instead of asking unanswerable questions, relaxation may happen. There is no method, but if there were, relaxation would be it. That is why my recommendation sometimes is to drink tea and eat cake. Let me end this with a quotation from Longchenpa. A fool trusting in his dogma is trapped. Losing his way in intellect, he fails to see the real meaning. And from his translator, Keith Dowman, there is this: relaxation is the key to Buddhahood here and now.